Last Thursday, 45 Israelis were killed and countless more injured in a tragic accident at Mount Meron in northern Israel, where thousands of Israelis had gathered to celebrate Lag BaOmer. Every human life is precious, but a single event that takes the lives of 45 people from a population of only 9.3 million is catastrophic in the life of a nation. We had recorded a podcast episode while I was in Israel, which was before this tragedy. It's an episode that tries to capture life in post-corona Israel. We were scheduled to post it last Friday, but we held off given events. Alon and I spoke to family and friends in Israel in the past few days, and we decided to release the episode after Israel's National Day of Mourning. So that's what we're doing. It's an episode on what we can learn from post-corona Israel about what's coming our way, based on conversations I had there around Israel's Independence Day. Welcome to Post-Corona, where we try to understand COVID-19's lasting impact on the economy, culture, and geopolitics. I'm Dan Sienel. Today we're doing something different. After 15 months of avoiding business travel, last week I boarded a plane to attend meetings in Israel. When I landed, it felt more like I boarded a DeLorean and time traveled ahead to the era of post-corona, a land far, far away. I arrived here on April 15th, the 73rd anniversary of Israel's Declaration of Independence, and the energy was electrifying. The streets were bustling, the restaurants packed, and the traffic insane. With 85% of Israelis, 16 and older, inoculated, and with fewer than 100 daily infections and hospitals emptying out, it was clear that as far as Israelis are concerned, the pandemic is just another chapter in history. Life in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem felt like a movie trailer for the rest of the world, coming soon to a theater near you. I wanted to capture this intangible energy and bring it to your ears. So I called up Tuli, a Tel Aviv sound engineer and a friend of ours who usually works on Israel's leading films and television shows. He joined me for an afternoon of conversations in the heart of Tel Aviv's bustling streets. I visited with Yonatan Sagiv, a Tel Aviv native, a PhD in literature, and a novelist who has written 3 popular Hebrew-language detective novels. I then met with Yara Kedar, a fashion historian and curator who is now working on her doctorate at Hebrew University. I wrapped up the day with my old pal Donna Stern, who is managing director of Yes Studios. These conversations paint a picture of life in post-pandemic Israel, a picture that could be our reality in a few months. But we start with Amit Aronson, a well-known restaurant critic in Israel. Amit's a television journalist, blogger, and writer. I usually check in with Amit when I'm in Israel, always guaranteed a good meal, a great story, and a lesson in history.
So we may begin. Okay, I'm rolling.
This is Post-Corona. Amit.
What's up? I didn't recognize you with your mask off. That's what people say here now. How are you?
Kol sabava.
I didn't wait for you by the table because you have to catch a line here. You have to queue.
And you got to strike when there's an opening.
Exactly.
By the way, they told me I got here on Thursday, so I got here on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And people said that on Sunday there's going to be no more mask requirement.
Outside.
Right. Okay, so tell me where we are.
We're at the HaKosem, which
In the area? What's the area?
it's really the heart of urban Tel Aviv, and a falafel place, but a falafel place really like no other. And this place...
Like the cathedral of falafel.
More than that. I always say the HaKosem means the magician. Now I say that he's a magician because it's the only line in Israel that's actually a line and not a circle. You can see people queuing for a falafel. And now it's not something that you have to, it's not rare. There are on the street alone, there are maybe 10 falafel joints, and none of them has a line. Shalom. What are you having?
You go first. I need to think. This is stressful. There's too much I want here.
I'll go for אני רוצה שווארמה. בפיתה.
Shawarma. Shawarma.
So let's do, אז אני אקח, so I'll take sabich and he'll take shawarma. See how many cooks? And that's the man with the plan. That's Ariel, Arik, HaKosem. How much did you miss this.
I miss it a lot. I think it was for me it was a very hard time spiritually. Not to see smiles, not to see people.
When did you close?
In the 14th of March. It was Friday, at 4 o'clock we closed the place.
And you didn't reopen in the slot that was in the middle, right? Because there was a time in the middle around...
In the first episode, in the first episode, like everybody, the first week I was in shock. And after I said, like everybody, okay, we have vacation, once in a lifetime, let's go to the beach, let's surf. I did it. The second time, I started to understand that, okay, it was nice to be 2 months in the beach, but we have to do something. And then we start, like everybody, to make small deliveries. We learned how to do it good. It took time. We changed the delivery. You don't get it in a pizza like now, so you can build it by yourself.
But you have to understand, he's the exception in what he did, because many places started doing deliveries. So they would take the pita, they would wrap it somehow, and they would send it to you, and you would get this sponge mixture of, whatever you were supposed to eat initially. Arik, because he's the perfectionist that he is, decided he's not willing to do it because it doesn't live up to his standards, and then he started developing, how can I kind of, to reenact the Hakosem experience at home. He has his own music playlist that you get on a piece of QR code, and you get the music that you hear when you're here, you can listen to it at home.
I believe that food is not only about the ingredients, it's about a full experience. So I try to do as much as I can, also culinary, also in the way it's come to you, and the atmosphere, it's the bag and the music, to give you a little bit of me, of us, also at home, so the bite will be tastier.
So here, you want to walk? Let's walk and talk.
Go to it. I will.
You'll come back?
Yes, in a few minutes. Yes, I'm coming to you.
So, is this a typical day?
This is slower than a typical day, actually.
You're kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you.
Because if this were New York, people would think you're crazy. This many people, no masks, in one space.
Oh, this. I was very strict, going through COVID. I mean, I really barely met people. I canceled all my work meetings, everything. But now there are really very, very little cases in Tel Aviv. And in general, I mean, the number of new cases in Israel yesterday was like less than 100.
What struck me since I've been here is since the border is basically sealed to almost every non-Israeli. So it's only Israelis here.
Yes.
So it's a combination of no tourists. So I've heard very little English since I've been here.
Strange in Tel Aviv.
Especially this time of year. As you start April, May, June, you start to hear English everywhere. Same in Jerusalem. So I'm hearing no English. And it seems that because Israelis aren't really leaving,
They aren't.
but they're bursting at the seams to get out because they've been locked up.
You feel it everywhere. Israelis we were locked down for so long, and you see it in traffic, you see it in the restaurants, you see it in now that it was, Passover and Yom HaAtzmaut and all that. All the parks were filled to the brim with people. Traffic jams there was a day where they said on the news it was the worst traffic jams in the history of Israel.
Sunday?
Something like that.
Yeah,
Somewhere around.
I was trying to get around Tel Aviv on Sunday.
People did drives that usually take an hour and a half in 5.5 hours. It's like driving from, I'd say, if you drive, let's say from New York to Philly, it usually takes you, 2 hours, right? So think of that'll take you 7.
So why? What's happening?
Just, think of the champagne bottle that you shake for a long time and then you open it. That's what happened. We're very alive, we're always very alive, and when you put everybody in this pressure tank of not being able to meet one another, not being able to party, not being able to fly, not being able to eat at restaurants, and then instantly you kind of remove the cork, it just, it sprays everywhere. I didn't think it would be so, visible, how much people missed everything. Try to get a table at a good restaurant in Tel Aviv now, it's a month ahead. It used to be a week, and now it's a month.
Did this place get crazy, Arik? Did things start getting busy gradually, or was it like once you were open, it was instant?
It was crazy. The line was until 1 kilometer. When we opened, people not only was missing us, they was missing to go out.
But it was instant. It wasn't gradual.
Tel Aviv became picnic city. It was amazing. You see, Dizengoff Square? Yeah. it was the best party in town. During the time when you could not sit inside at restaurants, but you could take food on delivery or on takeouts, people put milk boxes, milk cartons, or beer boxes all over the place as improvised tables.
Everything was full. All the city was full.
The entire city, people sat on benches and ate from cardboard boxes and with the disposable utensils.
The government said that we can't sit on the table, so I ordered 200 beer boxes. So it was
And just set them up right here?
all over until over there.
So that's like a couple
Until
blocks
there,
away.
Yes.
So that's real innovation. That's Startup Nation.
Yes,
so
yes.
you set up beer boxes,
Yes.
and how many people did you have sitting at any given time?
200 people. No, it was all the street.
Even though there was a rule about not sitting at tables.
It's outside.
By the way, in the third time that we closed, Tel Aviv City, the mayor,
They put out the boxes.
they put the boxes of Tel Aviv City that you can see. So that they told you, if you was in table, I will give you a ticket, but
our
you can
box,
take
then
our
it's
boxes, it's okay. Yes.
Let me ask you one last question before you go. Does it feel to you that Israel, because right now the Western world is a few months behind Israel on reopening like this. This feels like another world to me. This is like getting in a time machine and going forward. Or do you just feel like we're getting back to life?
Both of them. You feel that you was lucky. You feel that you can say God was with us, and He gave us to be only 9 million people that can close the gates and can maybe do something.
Yeah.
Israeli doctors, we are preparing for war. We are preparing for trauma.
Well, this is partly why Israeli entrepreneurs and startups are so successful. Because Israeli entrepreneurs and startups live in a constant state of chaos. So if you're trying to build a company, that's a pretty good mindset to have. And I feel like the restaurant's got a taste of that.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to prepare
Okay.
us a few pizzas. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ari.
בתיאבון, תודה.
Toda. So is that the mood of all these guys running restaurants? Is sort of
There are not one and not 5 and not 10 restaurateurs that I know that are actually better off now than they were before the crisis. They won't tell you it. They won't tell it on record, but it is like that because
they are better off?
a little bit better off. Yes, I mean think of this place for example. This place, which fed, let's say I'm guessing around 1,200 people or 1,500 people on average on a day before. He still does that, but now he has about, 500 extra deliveries going out every day. So the investment he had to put in building his delivery infrastructure was quite low. So let's say he added 30% to the number of people he feeds on a day. That's 30% more money, you know?
And COVID forced him to invest in that,
Yes.
in
He
the
wasn't
delivery
in the beginning.
infrastructure sooner than he would have. By the way, you're seeing that with a lot of retail in the U.S., which a lot of retail had said at some point we have to get to our e-commerce strategy, or at some point we have to get to a delivery strategy, and COVID happened and then lockdowns happened and they instantly.
Of course, I saw it, I felt it. My wife works at Wix. So the number of places that opened retail, like e-commerce websites, it was ridiculous during this year.
So there's a certain level of energy that is through the roof, and you can see it here. Is this a burst, a spike in activity post-corona, or is this the new normal?
It'll be interesting to come here in 6 months, I guess, to see after the summer what happens. I'm hoping that it will remain on this level because even if us, the Israelis, will kind of, go back to our less energized mode, the tourists will come back. That's what I'm praying.
I landed here on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Someone said to me that Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, it felt a little bit like Israel's day, formal declaration of independence from COVID.
I agree.
Why was that day so important?
I think it was the first time that it was okay to party. Really, you didn't need to hide anymore because during the last year there were, underground parties going around and families getting together on holidays and you had people thinking, oh, I had friends over but I won't post the picture on Instagram because then they'll see I had someone at my house. And then on Yom Ha'atzmaut is like the biggest party of the year.
Thank you, Amit.
Pleasure,
This was awesome.
as always.
I got to run. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much. Then.
Ari kept bringing the plates of shawarma, falafel, and sabich. He was not terribly interested in whether I was stuffed or that I had to get to my next meeting. Tuli and I walked a few blocks over to Habima, which is the pedestrian square and park around Tel Aviv's main live theater auditorium. We grabbed a park bench to sit down with novelist Yonatan Sagiv. Yonatan is a PhD in literature. He has written 3 popular Hebrew-language detective novels. A Tel Aviv native, Yonatan had been living in the UK for the past decade, teaching modern Hebrew literature at the University of London. But he and his partner, whose tech job had originally brought them to the UK, uprooted their diaspora lives to move back to Israel during the pandemic.
So, how typical is this?
Well, a year and a half ago, I would say that this is extremely typical because what we're seeing here, which is amazing, I think we're seeing faces, right? Like a lot of people walking around, talking and sitting, and their faces are exposed.
No masks.
Yeah, no masks. I mean, the way that we're seeing people now, again, engaging and being in close contact, it's only happening in the last few months since the vaccinations. So, and I think we're all still feeling like very thrilled and very blessed that we can walk around like this.
So where are we?
So we're at the square of the National Theater of Israel, Habima, which is this big, beautiful square with a garden and flowers and running water. And this has been kind of like one of the centers to hang around and be together during the COVID. Sitting down in outdoor spaces, taking takeouts and drinks.
There's something so Israeli about that, which is Israelis feel the constant need to be with other people. So it was like, we need to figure out, we have to be innovative in figuring out how we're going to be with each other. And if it's pulling out beer boxes and sitting in front of park benches to make a makeshift dinner table, we'll do it.
Oh, definitely. Innovative and also, in a way, informal and disobedient. Because I think, for me, I've been living in London for the past 10 years.
Right.
So when I came here, after 7 months of not seeing my family and, living during the first lockdown in London, I was shocked to come to Israel. I mean, the mentality here with the pandemic was completely different from London, And I don't know if it's because of the culture or because of the way the pandemic progressed in the different countries. In London, the pandemic hit and hit hard. So when I came from London, it was very obvious to me that the corona is a serious threat. And also British people are more formal, they keep their distance, they're more obedient of rules and laws. And when I came here, it was a very, very different situation. Because Israelis, like you said, are a very physical culture, people were shocked that I'm not willing to hug. I mean, we're talking June, the pandemic is all around the globe, the graphs are going up, and people here are thinking that if I do not hug, I'm a crazy person who is
people here
hysterical.
For our listeners, they may not understand this. When you meet an Israeli, within minutes, your arms around them, you're hugging, it's just a very physical.
Yeah, it's very physical, touchy-feely, and everybody is called honey or sweetie, and you hug and you kiss instantly. And it was kind of like this throughout, in a way, the pandemic. Even in the third wave, even when Israel did experience for the first time, I feel, with the variants, the real threat of COVID, people still kept, like we said,
being affectionate, and they couldn't comprehend how. But I can't be affectionate. I mean, I'll comply with all your rules, but I still need to be affectionate.
Yeah, and even, you complied with the rules, but not exactly, because you would still come and visit your parents. You would still be with them sometimes in their own house, and you would still hug them. And Corona be damned,
Right.
So
you were living in London, as you said.
Yeah.
So why did you move to London?
So I have been away from Israel for the past almost 15 years. First, I was in New York, living for 6 years, doing my PhD in NYU in Jewish studies. Then I moved to London because my partner got a job.
Why did you come back?
It sounds kitsch, and I wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but I think what the corona highlighted for me and for a lot of people out there, I kind of call it now the return of the expats, is the need to be close. The need to be close to your
all
culture.
these Israelis, because in the tech world, there's often this criticism that with Israel you have all this brain drain, all these talented tech people leaving to take tech jobs in the West. And I always described it more as it's less of brain drain than brain circulation. that Israelis, they've, wanderlust. They want to wander and go work in different parts of the world, but they ultimately, most of them, ultimately, may take some longer than others, but they ultimately wind up back here. And by the way, when they do come back here, they bring with them a lot of experience and know-how and working in other companies and working in the West. But it seems that COVID has accelerated that for a lot of Israelis. There's a lot of Israelis scattered all over the world, and then there was like an ingathering of the exile.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with your observation that first thing, it always happened. I think Israelis travel a lot, they work a lot abroad, and then for some it will take 5 years, for some it will take 10 years. At the end, they will come back. But I think COVID and the corona really accelerated that process. And especially when I came back here in November, there was all that talk about, so the city is dead, right? All around the world, cities are dead. People want to go back to the suburbs. They want greenery. And Airbnb is gonna, become to dust. And I can tell you that when I came back to Tel Aviv in November, you couldn't find an apartment here. And Airbnb, the prices skyrocketed, rents skyrocketed, because so many expats returned to Israel. They wanted to be with their families. They wanted to come back to their homeland where they're feeling, safe and intimate, and they know the workings around. And it really accelerated the process. I don't know if it's here to stay.
That's my question. I am struck, and this is anecdotal, by the number of tech entrepreneurs that I know who built businesses that required them to live abroad. So they started tech companies in Israel, and all the engineering know-how was in Israel. They said, but if we want to go do sales and marketing, we've got to go set up an office in the US. If we want to go do business development, we've got to go do it in the US. And so they would set up operations in the US, keep a headquarters here, set up operations in the US, and then the CEO or the co-founders would move abroad to the US or to London. And I'm struck by how many of them now are moving back, and they're saying they're moving back for good. Why? Because they said the pandemic, the lockdowns proved that it's easier to work virtually than we thought. And that's not going to change. It's not to say we all want to permanently work virtually, but some kind of hybrid living where we're in person with the people we have to interact with in business around the world, and we also can do a lot of it virtually. It means it gives us more flexibility to live where we want to live, not where the business is. We can live where we want to live. And if we can live where we want to live, and we're raising families, we want to be living in a place that's more consistent with our values, where we feel more at home, where there's more communal connections, more familial connections. And Israel is that for many of these Israeli entrepreneurs. So they said, look, I can run my tech company and be a global company from Tel Aviv or from Jerusalem and be connected globally in a way I never could have imagined, because the pandemic showed me I could be connected globally even during a pandemic. And that'll continue. And the tech tools are there to enable that. And I can raise my family here.
Yeah. One thing that I see now in post-corona Israel is how quickly things bounce back. I mean, it's only been a few months since the vaccinations have started to happen. And people already are almost not talking about the corona. People are, again, coughing and not being hysterical. People are sitting in coffee shops, restaurants, going to clubs, going to concerts, and...
By the way, the day I got here, I was stunned. In downtown Tel Aviv, something I just haven't seen. I saw lines around the block of young people, 18, 19, 20, lining up to get into clubs. Like the velvet rope line's back. I'd forgotten about the velvet rope line during Corona. And then you see lines of people and they're packed together. I'm thinking, these people, what are they doing? And they're lining up to get into a tiny place where they're going to be on top of each other.
Yeah, they're packed. And that's why I'm saying this, because, I still read now, because, the world is not like this. I read articles in The Guardian and the New York Times. Will we ever go back to restaurants? And I'm like, yes, trust me, you will. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think people immigrate and move around for different reasons, and some will decide to move again. And we will also see, of course, new generations of young people that just want to go out there to the world and explore. So I think we'll still see again a very globalized world with a lot of movement. Again, I think I really
Yeah.
do not know.
You're a fiction writer.
Yes.
What kind of literature do you think will come out of this period? The not the period we're in this moment, but the corona period, this 15, 16 months of lockdown, of human catastrophe globally, of shared experience, and that I can't think of anything in my lifetime where there's something going on in the world that literally affected everyone, that almost everybody was waking up every day and at some point thinking about the same thing that everyone around the world was thinking about. How will that manifest itself in literature?
Yeah, it is so difficult to know because I think we all have this, in a way, double expectation. On the one hand, you kind of like, you want to have the vaccines and you want to get it over with. And then you don't want to write about it because you feel you've been submerged in it for so long that you kind of want to imagine that life will just bounce back and you will write your literature, and I'm also writing for TV now, and you don't want to imagine writing again like people with masks and people not shaking hands. You want to see write fifth season of Billions, and you want to see them sitting down in the office and just talking about stocks. You don't want to see them talking in Zoom.
Right.
But on the other hand, like you said, this is such an event with such huge magnitude, such a break in our shared experience that I think we won't be able to pass it. So first I envision a really big wave of bad sci-fi and fantasy, speaking about maybe bad vaccinations that will lead to like disease and mutations, conspiracy of this conglomerates, spreading viruses, or
I'm waiting.
engineering human beings.
I'm waiting for the series on the China versus U.S. intelligence communities.
Exactly.
Race to a vaccine.
Yes, exactly. We're going to have a lot of
The
maybe
thrillers.
Exactly, Netflix shows kind
Right.
of like documenting how it all was laid down. But then I think also, less jokingly, but I do think it will happen.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot of literary works dealing with isolation, dealing with mental problems that arise from isolation. And I think the other spectrum of that would be a lot of narrative talking about reconnection and about coming home and coming back to your family, and how we kind of like reestablishing these like familial and human bonds after such a break and after such an earthquake has happened to us.
There's very little written about the Spanish flu period. Very little.
I keep thinking about that.
You have a theory on why?
Maybe that's the reason why we all forgot in a way about the Spanish flu. I think maybe there is a chance that we will kind of view this, if the vaccinations will work, hopefully, and if, as in Israel and as I think in a few other countries are happening now, we will look back at it as sort of this crazy period of a limbo, that we were all suspended for a year and a half, but then life kind of like returned. Maybe there is a chance that we will try to avoid it in our literary works and in our creative work, and just like plunge back into the world rushing back to us.
Do you think there's something unique? You say everyone here is physically affectionate. Do you also think there's something very communal about the place? People want to be not just physically, hugging, but just it's a place that people are out and about, with each other.
I think there's so many reasons for that. I think Jewish society, even before Israel, Jewish diaspora has always been organized in small communities, and with the emphasis of charity and community. So people really huddled together in a way. There were also, of course, historical and societal reasons for it, like anti-Semitism and ghettos. So I think we're talking from the beginning about a community that really puts an emphasis about togetherness and being close to one another. And then it's a small country that feels that it's always at war with its outside enemies. So Israel, for good reasons and for bad reasons, it's sort of like a pressure cooker. So everybody's together, everybody's really close to one another, and it translates to like the physical atmosphere and also to the mental perception of it. So yeah, people are not willing to abandon closeness.
And then when they've been told they can't be close to one another, and then they're told, now it's okay to be close with one another. It's like shaking up a Coke can and cranking it open. That's what I see around here.
No, amazing imagery.
Everywhere I look, it's like just people. I was at a restaurant the other night in Tel Aviv in Carmel Market, M25, and I was watching people, and they just kept hugging each other throughout the night. like it's one thing they hugged each other when they arrived. Oh, it's so great to see you. And then they hug again, and they hug, and they're just.
That is a great metaphor, and I think it's exactly like that. So people are, I mean, Tel Aviv is exploding right now. You can feel the vibrations in the air, and people are hugging constantly. People are traveling throughout the country. You can't get a booking in a restaurant. You can't get a booking in a hotel. And the city in the streets, it's packed. And I think this is a very special moment because you still remember kind of like the trauma of the past few months and of not being able to do that fully in the way you wanted. And so you're still literally embracing the possibility of embracing. And that's why I think Tel Aviv and Israel in general now is in such a close contact with its people.
All right, this is great. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was starting to get pretty hot, typical for a late April afternoon in Tel Aviv. Tuli and I wandered over to the Montefiore Hotel, a boutique spot just west of Allenby Street, to meet fashion historian and curator Yaara Kedar. Yaara is now working on her doctorate at Hebrew University. She moved her family back to Israel right before the pandemic.
So Yaara.
Yes.
Yaara. Where are we?
We are at Hotel Montefiore,
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. I think it's actually my favorite place in Tel Aviv.
Why?
I love the palm trees and the leather sofas, and it's always busy, no matter what time you come here.
Yeah.
There are always people sitting there and drinking, no matter what time of day it is. The fashionable crowd would be here, businessmen and women, but also people that are celebrating because it's like a fancy place.
Okay, so you live in Tel Aviv,
Yes.
but you lived in New York?
Yes, I lived in New York until December 2019. We spent 8 magnificent years there,
Where in New York?
the Lower East Side.
So you were in New York. New York's a fabulous place to be.
It is.
You spent 8 years there. What brought you back here?
In New York, I started curating exhibitions, both in New York and in Israel. And after a while, I started also lecturing on fashion and art. I started traveling back and forth all the time, and I was away from home. I was away from my family.
Your family, which was in New York.
Yes, no matter where I was away from my family. When I was there, I was far from my family here in Israel, and when I was in Israel, I wasn't with my child and my husband. And it started to take a toll, and it became increasingly harder to do. And initially, we just said we're going to take a year off, go to Israel, spend a year there, and then decide what's going to happen. But our initial plan was to go back to New York after a year. And it was December 2019, and then, the world
Changed.
Yeah.
Little did you know at that point what was going on in Wuhan. And in terms of the fashion industry, what changed during the pandemic?
There's a thing in Zoom that you start staring at yourself. And you start looking at yourself and you start noticing things, how your hair looks, your glasses, things that you've never seen before, earrings, nail polish, all these things became really important.
In terms of personal engagement with people, I mean, it feels to me it was the end of small talk.
hopefully we're going to resume to small talk. But it was the end of small talk, because when I think of how much small talk there is around the water cooler, no less, or just in the hallway at the office, or when you start a meeting and you walk into a meeting with 5 people and you're waiting for everyone to get there and there's chit chat, while you talk to this person, you talk to this person before the meeting commences, and Zoom work life was just too efficient, because it was just like the meeting starts at 4, screens go on, 4, we're on. There's no small talk. There's no, oh, what train did you take to get here for this meeting? Oh, what's the weather supposed to, oh, did you see this film? It's just, you go right in it. It's gonna be weird for there to be a resumption of small talk.
That's a really interesting question. I have to say that I think Israel in general, there's this culture of like going back really quickly to the way everything was. And I feel that it's and talking to friends from New York, for example, I think it's like a unique thing that's going here, and maybe it has a lot to do with our history of, needing to endure and move on and just forget everything that just happened.
Give me examples in history. That's a really interesting point.
I remember growing up as a teenager in Tel Aviv, and there were bombings. And we used to go out after every bombing.
So what years? Is this during the Second Intifada?
It's like the end of the 90s.
Like the Sparrow bombing in Jerusalem, the Dolphin. You're talking about like coffee shops and bars and buses being bombed? Yes. It's okay. So during a wave of
90, I would say
terrorist
96, 7, 8, even later than that. And then I was no longer a teenager. I was like 19, 20. But when there were terror attacks, we would go out. We would go out to like...
So there'd be news of a terror attack and the country would be frozen, and yet there was the mindset was, we got to get back to life.
Yes.
We got to get back to our routine. Let's get out.
Go dance, go do something that has nothing to do with it. Otherwise, you're going to sink in the situation and fear, I would say. And this was, at least for me, it was a major part of growing up in Israel. You were scared of being attacked. And so I think escapism is a major part of living here and being able to absorb everything around you, but then being able to cut and then switch to a completely different setting, a completely different atmosphere, being somewhere else.
So do you think that's a uniquely Israeli cultural mindset?
I suspect so.
Given the frequency and volume of instability, that you just quickly have to, in the wake of all the stability, get some stability.
Exactly. And going back as quickly as possible to what was familiar, what felt like normalcy before. We went to the movies this week and it was packed.
You were next to human beings?
Yes.
Wow. Bold.
Who were crying and laughing.
What movie?
It was To Take a Wife with Ronit Elkabetz. It was, Ronit Elkabetz was a cultural heroine of Israel. Okay. And she passed away 5 years ago, and her brother arranged a special screening of one of their films that she directed, and she is the protagonist of the film. And we went to see a movie in the theater. It was amazing. And then I texted a friend from New York that we are in the movies. And he said, it's going to take a while for New Yorkers to do that.
I agree.
He said, we're not like you.
So for I think, Americans watching what's happening here, it's, I felt like I was getting in a DeLorean and going forward in time. And I'm going to come back to New York and try to tell people what's waiting for us. I went 5 months ahead, guys, and now I'm back. Let me tell you what it's like. What do you tell people?
I think predicting the future became almost impossible. And we always relied on being able to say, this will pass, this will fade. And now we really don't know. It was such a surprising turn of events that I think everyone are more cautious about making plans for the future. I do think that it's easier for Israelis who don't like to make long-term plans anyway. For Israelis, I think it feels more natural to...
Why don't Israelis like to make long-term plans?
because you never know you never know what's coming.
A friend of mine the other day, his daughter just got engaged. And I said, oh, when's the wedding? Is it next year? Is it, he says, I was thinking 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I was like, or 2 months, whatever it was. Yeah. And I said, what? He goes, first of all, Israelis do short engagements anyways to begin with. True. And then COVID shrunk them even more for this exact reason. Because we just don't know if there's going to be another variant. Or you just don't know. So we're loose now. We're free. We've had our Independence Day, literally and figuratively. We're free of Corona. Mm-hmm. If my daughter wants to get married now.
It's true. I think the idea of celebrating like there's no tomorrow is literally the idea behind many of the celebrations here.
All right, well, thank you for doing this.
So now I'm bound.
This was great.
My pleasure.
It's about 5 p.m., and the tree-lined pedestrian and bike lane strip in the middle of Rothschild Avenue, in the heart of Tel Aviv's tech and art scene, is jammed. I met TV and film executive Donna Stern there for coffee in front of one of the kiosks in the middle of it all. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Donna has a knack for turning hyper-local shows like Fauda, On the Spectrum, and Shtisel into international hits. Earlier in life, Donna lived everywhere from the U.S. and London to Singapore.
In Israel, I feel like I hopped into a DeLorean and like time traveled to post-corona. I talk about what post-corona may look like. I feel like I've traveled to it.
I am actually describing, it's funny you should use, the Back to the Future reference, because I literally use that. Remember that scene where Marty McFly finds the almanac?
Yes.
And then he kind of goes, okay, this is the way to make some money off this, right? It's kind of like that. So everybody I speak to, I kind of tell them, I can give you a glimpse into the future. We've never been able to do that before.
So I feel like that's me right now. I'm here and I'm like, so I want this episode to just be talking to some people who live here in Tel Aviv who can describe what is, hopefully, God willing, coming our way, just like 5 or 6 months behind you guys. So first of all, where are we right now?
So we're in the epicenter, I think, right? If you had to describe like Tel Aviv of today. So we're on Rothschild, right in the center. I mean, we can see the National Theater from here.
Yeah, I was there earlier today.
Yeah, and then if we kind of could just continue down on Rothschild straight, heading west, we'll just reach the beach. So it doesn't get more Tel Aviv than that.
Okay, so this is a pretty eclectic group of people. This is rush hour. So we have young people going back and forth to work. We've got children on skateboards and scooters. We've got
the electric scooters everywhere, traffic at a standstill, people running red lights all over the place.
Right, but like at any moment, there's someone whizzing by on an electric scooter, which is terrifying. And we're sitting here on seats and a milk crate. Okay, so do you think this is like a thing now, the street like vibe? Like, look at, there's blankets all over the place. It's like picnics everywhere.
Everybody just wants to get outside.
Okay, so you said the other night when I saw you, it's like when you're listening to a podcast and you increase the speed of the podcast to 1.5 or 2x. That's what life is like in Tel Aviv now.
Everybody's living rapidly. It really is. It just feels like that everything is going at warp speed. It's like faster than it ever was. And if I had to describe it, we pressed pause for a year and then we press play, but it was play at times, 1.5. It's just everybody feels like they need to cram everything that they missed out on immediately. And we have no patience anyway here. We've always been kind of fast and, and loose, but now it's just like, we feel like we deserve it. Right. We've spent a year locked indoors, spent no money, thinking this was the end. And look, it's not. The sun's still shining. Sky has not fallen. And, let's make up for lost time and let's do it quick.
So you said to me that like Yom Ha'atzmaut, Independence Day felt like the day. Like independence, not only celebrating Israel's independence, but like independence from COVID. That's really when the masks came off.
Oh my, it was crazy. I mean, Independence Day, I've never seen anything like it. And usually, the next day we'll have a barbecue, so kind of like 4th of July, right? Usually we get invited to one, maybe two, one in, early, and then
And that's the thing here, right? On Independence Day, that's what people do. They go to barbecue.
Yeah. So during the day, we go to barbecues. The night before, we party. And it's a really interesting transition regardless between, our Memorial Day, which is a real somber event. It's a real, and the few hours kind of in between the two holidays is one of the unique times that you spend and everything stops and people get very serious and somber and kind of locked up. And then as soon as, that hour between 8 and 9, where there's like the official ceremony, and at 9:30, the fireworks go off. This year, it was just like people went off. But it was just party. I had to drive one of my daughter's friends home. It was 3:20 in the morning. I could not move my car through the streets. And they didn't close the streets off. I would have been fine if they were just like, all right, whatever, a night of no traffic kind of thing. It was just people, drunk, happy, just right, walking in the middle of the street. You could not move traffic. And this was 3:20 in the morning. It just went on and on and on.
And yet, since I've been here, I hear very little English.
Well, there was none. So you were, if you don't mind me telling this, I've been telling this since I saw you. You're my curiosity. You're like my one friend who made it over.
Visitor number one.
It was, you really
Tourist
are.
number one.
Tourist number one. And at the restaurant the other night, I keep telling people, like, I'm so proud of the fact that you made it here, but how the fact that they didn't have an English menu for you. And this is a restaurant, it's a market restaurant. It is in the market, so the
Carmel market.
The Carmel market. And usually they have a revolving menu, right? It changes every day depending on what's fresh, and they just print it out. And you were sitting there, and the waitress goes over and says, English? We don't have an English menu anymore. And this is a place where you would only, hear English and French in the background. And she called over some of the other guys and said, look at him. He's like, he's a tourist. Oh,
we've got a tourist.
We've got a tourist. You're the first. So, yeah.
And that's because
and by the way, just going back to the barbecue thing, so usually we'll have 1 or 2. I think we had 4 invites. I mean, that's the double speed, right? People are just trying to find reasons to party.
And do you think, because in the U.S., it feels that even as we gradually reopen, it's going to feel very incremental. This feels, there's nothing incremental about this. As you said, it's like double speed. So is that
it went
an
from
Israeli
0
thing?
to 100
Right.
in
Is that an Israeli thing?
I don't know. We'll have to see, because I think we are kind of the first, and some of the countries are actually going backwards versus going forward, and certainly Europe is stuck right now. U.S. seems to be the better of the lot. And I thought when we kind of, and we had to, doing what I do and producing and developing, you were always producing and developing for Future, and we were writing things in like social distancing and shows. And
So you were actually integrating into shows.
Future shows that will be shot after COVID. And we thought, people would still be, so they wouldn't hug, they wouldn't kiss, they'd be like socially distant. You'd have to factor that in. That all went through the window. People are like hugging each other like they've never hugged before, double kissing, triple kissing, whatever.
But you say people have been saving money.
Yeah, so I'm actually, and that's why I'm saying, because I'm seeing people now just spend like there's no tomorrow. And to your question, will this continue? It depends on if the economy holds up. And right now, people feel like they've been pent up. They've certainly not spent money. They've had nothing to spend it on. They feel like they deserve it. They've really suffered in the last year. Like, people just want to spend on themselves. They want to splurge and indulge. I mean, you can't get a table in this city.
Someone said to me earlier that it was interesting that throughout Israeli history, there's this bounce back from tragedy. After a terrorist attack, people go out. Not only do they go out, but the place that was hit, the coffee shop or the bar, they try to reopen it as soon as possible.
You want a firm life. I think we want a firm life. I think we want to make sure, we're still living. I actually think it comes a lot from our history, like way back when, after the Holocaust. And you saw that the displaced persons camp. I mean, that's the first example you kind of have of that, after the Holocaust, when the Jews had nowhere to go and were kind of stuck. And I think it's this history that we have of going through, tremendous tragedy, but coming out on the other side and affirming life. And this boom that you're seeing, to your point, after every tragedy, war, terror attack, is one where, we don't get quiet and mournful. We actually celebrate what we do have.
Right. You've been traveling around the country.
Yeah, for the first time in my life. Pretty much since school.
So basically, you're a traveler. You were always traveling the globe. Suddenly you can't travel the globe. So you're like, I'm going to see parts of this tiny little country that I've never seen before.
To give you context, I was probably traveling twice a month on average overseas. Before the pandemic, for work usually, but half work, a little play.
Right.
In the past year, I've gone abroad twice, and I'm probably one of the few people that even managed to do that. So to me, it was getting, it's been getting a little cabin fever.
So places you went to.
I went to Dubai because you got to.
So you went to Dubai and you went to go see Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman.
I did.
With your kids in a movie theater in Dubai.
The day it opened. And she was on the Burj Khalifa when we were there, with a big advert like, in Dubai, on the tallest building in the world, you're seeing an Israeli actress play Wonder Woman. It was mind-blowing. This was December. It was my first time in a theater.
So, and you tell me where you've gone in the country, where you've traveled.
So in the time, we were kind of getting a little cabin fever, and now that hotels have opened, restaurants have opened, the roads have obviously opened. So that's the one unfortunate part of it, the traffic's back. You can't travel with your kids because they're not vaccinated. A lot of the countries won't have us back. So we're trying to kind of revisit our own countries. So I've been taking these weekends with the kids to various places in the countries, which ironically they've never been to. They've probably been to New York like 5 times, but they've never been to Nazareth, which is an hour and a half away. So we've been kind of using that, to reacquaint ourselves. By the way, we're not the only people doing it. Like everybody's.
I talk to people, they're like, everyone's going away.
I have a friend who is a tour guide. She speaks Italian, and she takes, usually Christians on pilgrimages, and poor thing, she hasn't worked in a year. And suddenly she's back working, and I said to her, like, what are you working on? She's like, I'm taking all these Israelis on Christian pilgrimage tours. They've never given it the time of day. She's never had an Israeli on any of her tours. And suddenly, she's taking him to the Jordan River and telling him the history of Israel from a Christian perspective, because that's the tour she knows. So,
just tell me a little bit about your TV and film life, producing television during the pandemic.
Shtisel seemed to be the first series we actually started and ended production entirely during COVID. So we had a few shows that had stopped because during the first lockdown back in March, everything stopped. Nobody had any idea how to deal with it as far as a production level. And plus that was the law, and we were just like, trying to find ourselves. So it all stopped. So we had a couple of series that went back just for extra days that they had to pick up. But that went back, I want to say very early July. It was scary. It was scary for everyone. Part of our cast is a little elderly, and they were very fearful about, catching COVID. Ironically, I think I can share this because he's been very vocal, but Shulem, Dovele Glickman, was the number one hypochondriac that we had, and he wouldn't travel with anyone, in the car, and he had his own room, and he didn't want anyone on set. Like, he was very particular. He was sure he was going to get COVID from one of the younger actors. Thankfully, nobody got sick at all during the shoot. Then he went off. He did this film for HBO. I believe it's in the Czech Republic. He took a private plane. It's called Oslo. It's based on the play.
Yeah.
It's for HBO. I think Steven Spielberg is producing it.
Did he too?
He did too. He got sick on a shoot for an HBO film in the Czech Republic. Had nothing to do with Shtisel. And everybody else is like, see, we told you.
So how did you do it on the set? Did you have everyone in a bubble?
Yeah, so we asked people to be in a bubble. So we can't afford to put people up in hotels and really sequester them from their families and friends. And plus they would never do it. Like if you ask an Israeli not to go back home for Shabbat where he's just down the road shooting, they're gonna go. So.
Right, especially because Israeli soldiers come home.
Yeah, everybody goes home on Shabbat, right? You can't do that. So, so we basically had pods. And for this season, I think you can tell too, if you kind of watch it closely, you can really tell there's two distinct storylines that never really cross over.
So you minimized to the extent
the contacts between the actors in different pods. They all had, separate rooms in which to rest. Usually they just have one crew room. I mean, we're not fancy. like they are, in other countries where everybody gets their own caravan and their own restroom and staff. Usually they're just huddled together, but this time we've had to. So it cost a lot more. And plus they got a lot of testing, and this is back, when testing wasn't as readily available.
Do you have a lot of Israeli friends who are living abroad who are now thinking about moving back here?
Yeah, or have already moved back.
Why are they moving back?
I think initially they moved back because it felt the world, from being very global, was suddenly becoming very nationalistic, and countries were closing the borders and changing the rules and making rules separately for their own nationals versus visitors versus tourists, certainly. And I think it kind of makes you feel like a second or third class citizen, and that suddenly feels a little uncomfortable when that starts to happen. Plus medical care, and anything that happens, you want to be home. You want to be close to your parents, to your siblings, if you have your friends, even if you can't see them, you kind of know they're there. And also, we do have great medical care.
But how much of it also is, like I'm seeing this in the US, if you're a tech engineer at a big tech company in Silicon Valley, suddenly you realize, like that editor, you're like, well, wait a minute, I can do my job from anywhere, and I'd rather raise my kids in Asheville, North Carolina, and I can still work for one of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley, and I get the best of both worlds. It doesn't affect my career, and I get to live in a community that's aligned with my values, where I want to raise my kids. And I think there's a lot of Israelis globally, I've seen this in the tech space, who said, oh, wait, I get to do this cool job and move back to Israel?
And move back here, and raise my kids here, and enjoy the lifestyle that I have here, be close to my parents, my friends, and there's a lot of that. We do really see each other. We do see each other as a family. Like, you will not go a week without seeing your parents. It's just not happening, no matter where they live and where you live in the country. It's not like we go back home on Thanksgiving and, for New Year's.
No. In Israel, every weekend is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good.
That's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed our on-location podcast recording. And most importantly, I hope this episode will help you look forward to our own return to post-corona life. If you want to follow Amit, Yonatan, Ya'ara, or Donna, we'll post their social links in the episode notes. Be sure to check those out. And if you have questions or ideas for future episodes, tweet at me, Dan Senor. Today's episode is produced by Ilan Benatar. Until next time, I'm your host, Dan Senor.